सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Imran Khan is in jail, and this time it looks like not for an overnight stay or a 2-day stay as has been the case in the past. This time it looks like it's going to be for some time at least. So he's in jail, and you know what? The streets are mostly peaceful. There is very little protest, if at all, in Pakistan. Although before his arrest, he issued an appeal, he released it on social media, asking his people not to sit inside their homes, not to sit indoors, but to come out and protest. But this time, people are cautious. They haven't done it. Last time they had done it in May, this had gone out of control. We remember that many military installations were also hit, including a corps commander's home and some memorials that the Pakistani military considers very important for them, memorials to their famous war heroes, including memorials for those who won the highest gallantry awards. Those were also hit, and that's what the army did not like, and army then retaliated, and a lot of people were sent to jail, and some people were fired, including many mid-level and senior officers in the army, including significantly a corps commander, Lahore Corps commander. This time, no such thing has happened. Imran Khan is in jail, and you know what? On top of that, Pakistan government has indicated, short of a formal announcement or a notification, they have indicated that while elections are due constitutionally in November, chances are that elections will not be held in November. In fact, I said very carefully, very cautiously that short of a notification, but I will explain to you the complexities that have now been created, whereby it will become very difficult. Somebody will have to be very creative constitutionally, or Pakistani Supreme Court will have to do something really strong to ensure that elections take place not just on the due date of November, but even in the foreseeable future, that's within a couple of months after November. I will come to that. Before that, however, I will tell you something that happens in newsrooms. We use a lot of cliches, and those cliches become part of our daily conversation, particularly on the media. So if you see, for example, your TV channels, general discussions, you see newspapers, you will find many expressions and terms which get used all the time. That's because they are convenient to use. So what we do at ThePrint and any newsroom that I have run so far, we have a cliche watch. So we put a list of cliches and we say these words are banned as far as possible. Now it's quite possible that I might tell you that some word is banned and you will show me at some point, Dekha, this has been used under your watch. So millions of words are produced every day. Something will get in occasionally, but as far as possible, we ban those words. So for example, we ban the word narrative because everybody says you're changing the narrative. This is this narrative. This is that narrative. So change. So we'll not use the word narrative. It's a harmless word, but we don't use it just because it looks like it's been overused. It may be editorial whim as well. Similarly, among the words that I've put on banned list is deja vu. Deja vu is, this is what was expected, this was inevitable, this is what had to happen, this had happened. So to say all that, why do you use it? Why do you use a cliched foreign word? Also, my old news editor used to teach us, as far as possible, don't use a foreign word. So deja vu is a word we don't use. But you know what? Sometimes I think also that this is a word that was invented only for Pakistani politics. Now, why do we say so? Let me first quickly give you an overview. In 1950s, we've talked about this in detail in the past. No government was stable for more than a year and a half or so. So there were a series of changes, a series of the big brother, the hidden hand acting until late 50s when the army formally took over and Ayub Khan took over. He became the first full-fledged military dictator and chief martial law administrator of Pakistan. He stayed on He launched the 65 war on India. Then he lost power. He got discredited, partly also because he had promised and he had raised expectations of his people that Pakistan was going to defeat India, vanquish India completely, grab Kashmir. That did not happen. There was a lot of dissatisfaction. A post-war economy is always troublesome. He lost power because of many reasons. And then came Yahya Khan, another dictator, and so on and so forth. It carried on. But look at the history more precisely since elected democracy came to Pakistan. Elected democracy came to Pakistan after Zulfikar Ali Bhutto took over after the division of Pakistan, liberation of Bangladesh. Then Pakistan sort of rebooted itself. So initially, Bhutto was like a dictator or had dictatorial powers because army was very deeply and widely discredited. But then he brought in a new constitution, the 1973 constitution. Pakistan had elections and an elected government came in. Since then, so if we look at our history of Pakistan, our history of Pakistan, our historical understanding of Pakistan since then, since real elections started, real party-based elections started, no government, no elected prime minister has completed 5 years in power. No elected prime minister. The odd elected government has completed 5 years, but not the same prime minister. For example, in 2013, Nawaz Sharif came back to power with a very large majority, with a humongous majority, and as he had done earlier as well. But in spite of that, he was not allowed to complete 5 years. In about 4 years, he was disqualified by the Supreme Court of Pakistan, or completely, if I may use that expression, on completely fictional, I want to use a stronger expression, but I don't want to use expressions like that for anybody's judiciary, because after all, it is the Supreme Court of a nation. Really terrible judgment on a law which is based in a kind of theocracy. That law said that you cannot be holding public office if you are not Sadiq and Ameen. What that means is if you are not truthful and true to your word, something like that, right? So on that basis, he was dismissed, he was disqualified, he was also given a jail sentence of 10 years going ahead. Again, on the similar vague charges of corruption, which were not proved, more non-disclosure than corruption. Later, he was able to negotiate his way out of jail on health grounds, and he now lives in London. But 1973, if you go back, 1973, Bhutto, in 1977, Bhutto was thrown out by Zia-ul-Haq and later hanged by him, so that's 4 years, that's not 5 years, as an elected prime minister. After that, Benazir Bhutto became prime minister once for a short while. She was dismissed in 1990. Then Nawaz Sharif became prime minister once. He was dismissed in no time. Then Benazir Bhutto, then Nawaz Sharif, and then Nawaz Sharif, as we know, something that we are more familiar with. In 1999, Nawaz Sharif had a wide majority, but he was dismissed in a coup by General Musharraf and then jailed and then sent into exile. So he stayed in exile for many years after that, and then he returned to get that huge mandate of 2013 that I spoke about. 2017 he gets dismissed. His party, because it has a majority, continues on till 2018, but under a different prime minister, by which time that government is a complete lame duck which has also been kneecapped, because in any case its popular leader is out. Everybody knows that the powers that be, which is the Pakistani army, is not with that government, does not support that government, and everybody is waiting for that government to go. Also, by this time, everybody knows that the Pakistani army now has a new favorite. They have a new favorite and a new player, and that's the player that's going to win, because first umpire, second umpire, third umpire, DRS, all is going to make sure that that player will win, and that is Imran Khan. So then the election takes place. In the election, the army rigs the election. Widely, it's well known that the army rigs the election, and yet Imran Khan is not able to get a majority. As Imran Khan fails to get a majority, usually you would expect the other side also to try and see if they can rig up a coalition, but no such luck. In this case, the big brother himself comes in, that is the army. General Bajwa was then the chief. The army comes in because Imran Khan is their candidate and their player, and they then install him. They also get defectors from other parties, and they rig up a majority for Imran Khan. And Imran Khan that then comes to power, and the army thought, he's our man. He will do as we tell him to do. But you know what? When you get power, when you sit in a chair that has power, it can go to your head very quickly. And that's what happened to Imran Khan. Imran Khan, while he was a selected prime minister, his was a selected government because the army had selected him. He had not even won a majority in that election. In any case, he had only come close to a majority because the most dominant party in the country and the most popular and the most dominant leader in the country then, that is Nawaz Sharif, had been jailed, convicted, disqualified from contesting elections, and then exiled. So even in his absence, even with his party totally victimized by the establishment and the army, etc., a lot of his party people in jail, that is Nawaz Sharif's party being in jail, in spite of that, Imran Khan had failed to get a majority, but the army installed him. But once he was installed into power, he started thinking that this is my real power. I am very popular, right? I can do what I want. So in fact, if you go back to some of my writings, I write a series called Writings on the Wall that I usually do when I travel through elections in parts of India, occasionally in neighboring countries as well. So this was one in the same series that I wrote out of Pakistan during the 2013 election campaign. That is where Imran Khan made an impact. He came in waving his cricket bat everywhere. And if you see the headline of that article that I wrote, that headline is, "Me captain, you my team, so vain, so successful," because Imran Khan ran a very vain campaign and very vain kind of politics. He was also successful in the sense that he was growing in support. Now what happens is, you may have that street support, which means you can get a lot of people out to back you. Maybe they'll all vote for you, but not everybody who's voting. They are not still a majority of the people who are voting. Your supporters can be very vocal, but not a majority. And that's what led to Imran Khan's delusions. He was always delusional. He was delusional also about his cricket and his prowess in cricket. But this really went to his head. And he started now thinking that I'm a leader in my own right and I will do my own thing. So he began changing the direction of Pakistani politics as if he had the mandate to do so. Mandate in Pakistan means, do you have the mandate of the GHQ? Do you have the mandate of the army or not? In his case, he turned Pakistan into a very anti-American power, very hostile to America. He began to talk a very Islamist language, which the army may not mind when it comes to being used vis-a-vis India, but not otherwise, because the Pakistani army wants a good relationship with the Western world. It's very important for them, particularly the American world. Not only are they dependent on the Americans for their weapons, their training, their maintenance, but also for their good life afterwards, or for their good afterlife. Because what happens once they retire with all the riches that they've collected in military service? They go to the Western world, and where do their children go, and where do they run their businesses? There are so many Pakistani generals, including former chiefs and their families, who built humongously successful, lucrative business empires overseas. In fact, we have taken note of many of these in our episodes of Cut The Clutter. We had one on General Bajwa, on how much money and how many pieces of land and properties had he collected while being the army chief. There was also the famous Papa John pizza story. That was another general whose family built a big pizza franchise overseas, and there are many others. In Pakistan, the chiefs change, but the power of continuity remains only with one institution. That is the army. So prime ministers come and prime ministers go. And I've given you this little inventory from 1973 to tell you that when a prime minister comes in, you know that at some point the prime minister will lose his job, no matter what his majority. At some point, the prime minister will face corruption charges. At some point, most likely, the prime minister will be convicted for corruption, and at some point the Prime Minister will be jailed or exiled. Look at Benazir Bhutto. When she came back second time to power, she was convicted and jailed again. Now, she was jailed earlier by Zia-ul-Haq. When Zia-ul-Haq was a dictator, she was jailed months earlier when Zia-ul-Haq was the dictator who had jailed her father and actually judicially assassinated him. She was seen as a threat. So she was then a very young woman, barely into her 30s, and she'd been jailed in really tough conditions in one of Pakistan's most brutal prisons. Now, during yet another stint in power, she was again charged with corruption and convicted and then exiled. The brave woman that she is, she came back. She was campaigning against the national election in 2007, and what happened in the course of the campaign? She was assassinated. Until today, no assassins have been caught, because if you ask anybody in Pakistan, they will have an idea, or at least they'll have a suggestion, or they'll look at you meaningfully, because they all think they know who was responsible for assassination. That will be some forces closer or close to the powers that be, because she was seen to be troublesome. So even if our party then won a majority, even if it did, right, even then Prime Minister would be a much weaker person, and her husband Asif Ali Zardari obviously would not be allowed to become Prime Minister, although he controlled the party now, but he became the president, which is like a titular position, and that government never really had full authority. So once again, no Prime Minister, full 5 years in power, no popular Prime Minister who hasn't gone to jail as yet, no popular Prime Minister who hasn't been exiled as yet, except Imran Khan. So let's see what happens to him now. It's early days for him. At least this innings of his is still in its early days. He lost power in April of 2022, so we don't know what happens now, but he is now a convict. And because he is a convict, he's got a 3-year jail sentence. He is disqualified from contesting elections for the next 5 years, unless this conviction is set aside or stayed. Now, I can tell you about the issues that led to this conviction. In fact, I will share with you the link to an earlier episode of Cut The Clutter, that in which we had specifically and in detail looked at the Tosha Khana issue. So the Tosha Khana issue is that a lot of the people, particularly foreign heads of state, give gifts, sometimes expensive gifts, to a country's leader. Those gifts, under most civilized countries' laws, have to be turned over to a government treasury or to a government storehouse, which is called Tosha Khana. Tosha Khana comes, I think, from Persian, right, where you keep your valuable things of the ruling darbar. Usually, those are then valued and auctioned, etc. In Pakistan, such regulations did not exist, and to the extent that these existed, you could, the recipient, which is Prime Minister in this case and his wife, they could buy them back at a predetermined price. So the story is, the allegation is that these were very expensive things, particularly in a very expensive, particularly super expensive watches, some going into like almost 4 crore Pakistani rupees. Now, for ease of calculation, take about 3.5 Pakistani rupees to 1 Indian rupee, right? So going into those values, and those were then undervalued and taken by Imran Khan, and not just kept with himself, but these were sold in the market in Dubai. One of these was also a watch gifted to him by Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, which actually had an embossing of the Kaaba, an embossing of the outline of Kaaba in Saudi Arabia on the watch. So he sold that watch as well. That is the specific gift on which now he's been convicted by the trial court, which has said, and I quote from the judgment, that has said dishonesty has been established beyond doubt, and I close quotes. Now, everybody knows that if the bosses were with him, this would not have happened to him. This is a command performance even by the judiciary of Pakistan, and it's not the first time they've done it. You can go right back to Bhutto's execution, Bhutto's judicial execution. Pakistani judiciary has rarely, if at all, stood up to any of this. They would usually go with what the establishment wants. In fact, if I take you back to the Bhutto judgment, in the Bhutto judgment, only 3 judge had dared to dissent. So he is among the great judges that this subcontinent has produced. You can imagine the degree of difficulty and the challenge for a judge to stand up and say Bhutto is being convicted wrongly or he's being executed wrong. But he did that almost 45 years ago. Which brings us to the second complication. The second complication I told you earlier on, that is about the timing of elections. Now usually under Pakistan's constitution, the constitutional arrangement is that a government finishes its tenure, which this government, which is now Shahbaz Sharif's government, they'll finish their tenure on the 12th of August. That is at the end of this week. Once that happens, a caretaker government comes in. Unlike the Indian system, the same government does not become caretaker. Another government is established only to hold elections. The constitutional arrangement is that the Election Commission of Pakistan, once a government has completed its tenure, the Election Commission has to hold the fresh election within 60 days. 60 days. Again, if the government does not complete its full term, then the Election Commission of Pakistan has 90 days. So first of all, there are reports from Pakistan, and I quite believe them, that Shahbaz Sharif will not wait till the end of this week for dissolving his parliament. He might do it a couple of days earlier, because if he does it a couple of days earlier, that gives his election commission the fig leaf to take 90 days instead of 60 days. That is the constitutional arrangement, because they don't want to hold elections in a hurry. So you get another month's time already. The second big thing that's happened is that just yesterday, a body called Council of Common Interest. Council of Common Interest is a council of Pakistani central government, or federal government as they call it, and the chief ministers of the states, and three high officials, in this case cabinet ministers, chosen or nominated by the Prime Minister, a little bit like our National Development Council used to be, but only a little bit. There is no other comparison. So this body met, and this body accepted the report of the census, of the latest census. The Pakistanis have their censuses more frequently than we do. So the last one was 2017. This is the 2022 census, of which the report has now come, and the Council of Common Interest has accepted that report. Now, why does a census report and the acceptance of a census report come into a discussion which is about elections and politics? Because Pakistan's constitution says that every election has to be held based on a delimitation of constituencies according to the latest census results available. It's not like India, that delimitation has been frozen for a certain period of time and you can keep kicking the can down the road. Not like that. With every census, you change your constituencies. Now, if this census report has been accepted, once the cabinet accepts it, the Pakistani cabinet, and notifies this, once they notify it, then the Election Commission of Pakistan has to first carry out a delimitation of constituencies, all the constituencies in Pakistan at the same time. As you can see, this cannot happen over one working week. So the usual time given to Pakistani Election Commission to carry out this delimitation exercise all over the country is at least 120 days, 4 months. So 4 months of delimitation, and then you start the electoral process, because you can't start the electoral process and campaigning until you've decided what your new constituencies are going to be, because then who can choose their candidates and who can start campaigning. So that means another 4 months, at least another 4 months delay. Now the constitution of Pakistan says that, look, once a government is gone, you have to hold elections within 60 days or 90 days. Whether Shahbaz Sharif decides to recommend dissolution of National Assembly this Wednesday, right, that is 90 days, or on Saturday, that is 60 days. So that is the constitutional position. You have to hold elections by then under a caretaker government, and caretaker government has always had very limited powers like a caretaker government would. But there's a twist there that I will come to, because it's Pakistan. You can always make and change rules on the run. Now, if the Election Commission of Pakistan now needs 4 months to carry out a delimitation, that is a restructuring or redrawing of constituencies based on this census report, then it runs into a constitutional contradiction. That is, compulsion by the constitution is to hold elections within 60 days or 90 days, and at the same time, The constitution also says that you have to now carry out a delimitation based on the latest census. So the chances are that this curveball will be thrown, that the Shahbaz Sharif government will issue this notification accepting the census report and notifying the census report, and then probably the case will go to Supreme Court of Pakistan, which will then decide when elections will be held. So it's quite possible that this will be a longer lasting caretaker government in Pakistan's history. And if it's a longer lasting caretaker government, unelected, you know who will be in charge. So that means the army will be in charge, right? Army will be in charge, not in the front, but leading from behind or driving from behind. So they will be in charge. That's the reason I told you that there is a twist, that this will be a caretaker government, and usually a caretaker government does not take policy decisions, has very few powers, but lately, and you know where the directions are coming from, powers of caretaker governments in Pakistan have been enhanced. This caretaker government, which will now come in, has sufficient powers to make important decisions, also policy decisions, also sign arrangements or finalize arrangements or enter into deals with foreign countries as well. So that's why it looks like these new batters have taken a fresh guard and they are settling down for a long innings. The only difference is these batters are not in Pakistani ODI or T20 livery, nor are they in whites. They are in khaki, and you know what? They are not even new batters. They are the old batters, because I will tell you, after having spoken for so long about the fact that no elected prime minister in Pakistan lasts 5 years, since 2008, for 15 years, Pakistan has had a continuity of being quote-unquote governed by elected governments. I said quote-unquote governed because you have elected governments, but they are not necessarily governing all the time, because that power is with the armed forces, but the armed forces now do not come in front. So no coups are needed, the generals don't take over, the generals come and go. The new chief, as he comes in, like this one came in, Asim Munir came in last year, the new chief, as he comes in, does exactly what any chief of Pakistani army does, because they all know, I presume from the day they walk into the academy as young cadets, they know that ultimately each one of them has a shot at becoming the ruler of Pakistan. The only difference now is they don't become rulers of Pakistan formally, and that's why Pakistan has given us this unique innovation. This is called a hybrid government, which has now been in power for 15 years non-stop.